times is not about comfort. It is about conviction. It is not about blending I. It is about standing out when obedience demands it. Daniel's story reminds us that faith is proven not in easy decisions, but in costly ones. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This verse speaks directly to tough times. It acknowledges fear, but denies fear the final word. It promises strength when weakness presses. It promises help when loneliness threatens. It promises God's hand upholding you when every other support feels gone. My friends, faith in tough times is often tested through delay. Delay whispers that your prayers are unheard. Delay suggests that nothing is moving. But faith looks beyond delay and holds on. Faith declares that God's timing is never wasted. Faith declares that even silence is part of His working. Delay is not denial, and disappointment is not destiny. Faith keeps believing when circumstances remain unchanged. My friends, faith also grows through memory. When Daniel chose conviction, he remembered the God of his fathers. He recalled a history of deliverance, provision, and promises kept. Memory fuels courage. When you face tough times, think back on the prayers already answered. Remember the doors already open. Recall the ways God has already shown His hand in your life. The God who was faithful then is faithful now. Faith thrives on remembrance. Faith is also sustained by daily practice. Daniel prayed consistently. He did not allow environment to silence his devotion. He built a rhythm of faith that carried him even when danger increased. My friends, your faith will not remain strong if you wait for convenience. It must be fed daily. It must be strengthened with prayer, nourished with scripture, and exercised through obedience. Even small decisions matter. Choosing prayer when fear tries to dominate is faith. Choosing to worship when emotions are heavy is faith. Choosing to keep going when your heart wants to give up is faith. Faith must also be spoken. Daniel voiced his request. He opened his mouth and expressed his conviction. Faith in tough times cannot stay silent. It must speak promises, declare truth, and confess God's strength. Silence allows fear to grow, but speech builds courage. When you say, "I will trust in the Lord," your heart hears and your spirit strengthens. Words of faith align you with God's promises. My friends, faith is not built in isolation. Daniel had 3 companions who stood with him. Together they shared conviction. Together they endured. Community strengthens courage. When the burden feels heavy, isolation weakens faith, but unity multiplies it. Surround yourself with those who will remind you of God's word. Walk with those who will hold you accountable to keep believing. Faith grows in fellowship. Faith in tough times does not mean the absence of fear. It means you refuse to bow to fear. It does not mean every battle ends quickly. It means your strength lasts until the battle is over. Faith says, "I will not give up." Faith says, "I will not let discouragement write my story." Faith says, "Then God's hand is still guiding me." Even here, faith is a choice renewed daily. Each day you rise, you must decide again to believe. Each day you walk, you must decide again to trust. Each day you face difficulty, you must choose again to hold fast. Faith is not a one-time act. It is a continual decision. And that continual decision becomes the pathway to victory. This is why faith in tough times is powerful. It carries you when strength runs out. It anchors you when the storm rages. It builds you when the world tries to break you. Faith is not weak. It is enduring. It is not temporary. It is eternal. Hold on to faith, my friends, because faith will hold on to you. Let us now focus on this truth. Faith believes when resources run dry. My dear friends, life often brings seasons where strength, money, energy, or hope feel empty. You try to push forward, but the supply looks thin. In these moments, faith does not collapse. It clings to the God who provides streams in places where nothing is visible. Faith does not mature in times of comfort. It is shaped in places of scarcity. When the well is dry and the valley is silent, faith continues to expect God to act. It dares to believe that His provision can arrive in ways no one can predict. It waits with anticipation even when no evidence points toward change. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." That means the visible does not hold the final word. Sight measures conditions, but faith measures God. Eyes may see emptiness, yet faith testifies that God can fill it. Faith trusts the unseen reality of His power above the visible limits of the present. In 2 Kings 3, 3 kings marched out to fight the Moabites. The king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom traveled through a wilderness route. After 7 days, water ran out. The soldiers grew weak, and animals had nothing to drink. The leaders feared defeat before the battle had even begun. They believed God had abandoned them, that He had gathered them only for destruction. But they sought a word from the Lord, and the prophet declared something remarkable. They would not see wind or rain, but the valley would be filled with water. The land would be covered with pools. And not follow your logic. The method may not look like anything you planned. Still, His ways surpass your imagination. Faith leans into that higher wisdom and rests in His control. My dear friends, valleys often symbolize emptiness. They stretch wide with no sign of supply. Yet the valley became the place where God revealed His power. Your empty spaces are not wasted ground. They can become the very places where His provision appears. Faith declares that the valley will not remain dry forever. It proclaims that what looks barren today can overflow tomorrow. Humility plays a part here too. The kings had to admit they could not solve their crisis. Dependence on God became their only option. Faith often begins when self-sufficiency ends. When pride steps aside, room is made for divine supply. Notice also that God commanded them to dig ditches in the valley. This was preparation for water they could not yet see. Faith makes room before the miracle arrives. It acts as if the answer is already on its way. To dig in dry ground is to declare with action and trust God will fill what I cannot. Persistence also strengthens faith. The kings did not abandon the march. Even in weakness, they kept moving forward. Sometimes faith is simply the refusal to quit. It is pressing ahead when your strength feels gone. It is holding steady when delay tempts you to despair. Faith carries others as well. The water that arrived was not for one soldier, but for the entire army and their animals. Your faith can refresh more than just yourself. Your endurance can encourage your family, your friends, your community. Faith becomes a testimony that strengthens those who are thirsty around you. The enemy was also confused by the provision. At sunrise, the water looked like blood to the Moabites. They believed their opponents had turned on one another, so they charged carelessly and were defeated. God not only provided supply, but also turned provision into strategy. Faith trusts that God can take what strengthens you and use it to weaken your enemy. Faith in tough times may require waiting. The word of the Lord promised water, but it did not come instantly. The people waited through the night until morning broke. Patience tested them, yet faith held steady. Sometimes you must rest in the promise. Even when evidence is delayed, morning always comes, and with it the fulfillment of His word. Faith also reshapes how you view preparation. To dig when skies are clear requires trust. To prepare for rain when clouds are absent demands courage. Faith calls you to act in ways that seem illogical to human reasoning. Yet those who prepare in faith are ready when God's supply arrives. My dear friends, this is the pattern of faith. It leans on God when resources disappear. It waits for God when solutions seem impossible. It prepares for answers before signs are visible. It refuses to turn back when the valley looks endless. It declares that the God who fills emptiness is still at work today. This TR remains. Faith never depends on what you see. It depends on who you trust. The valley will not stay dry. God is able to fill it and He will sustain you. Faith keeps walking, keeps preparing, keeps believing until the morning of supply comes. And let us now reflect on this truth. Faith gives courage to walk forward when the path ahead is hidden. My friends, there are seasons when tomorrow feels uncertain. The future may look clouded and no clear answer seems to appear. In those moments, faith does not wait for full visibility. It chooses to step with trust, believing that God's guidance is present even when the road feels unclear. Faith is not careless or reckless. It relies on God's direction rather than human control. Uncertainty does not intimidate true faith because the believer understands that God sees the end from the beginning. Confidence comes from knowing that your steps are ordered by the Lord. Psalm 32:8 says, "Then I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye." This promise tells us that God is not distant. He is personal in His guidance. His eye is upon His children, giving direction, correcting steps, and providing wisdom. Faith rests on this assurance, trusting that even when details are missing, His watchful care is constant. Think about Ruth. Her story is one of resilience, was a humble task. Yet faith kept her steady. She did not know that these same fields belonged to Boaz, the man who would show her favor and later become her husband. By continuing forward in faith, Ruth walked straight into God's plan of redemption. Her decision placed her in the lineage of Jesus Christ. This story teaches us something powerful. Faith in tough times is not about having answers. It is about trusting God enough to move without them. When Ruth left Moab, she carried no clear plan. Still, she walked forward because faith does not freeze at the edge of uncertainty. It moves forward step by step, trusting God to open the right doors. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power." This verse tells us fear is not your portion. God does not hand you paralysis or panic. He gives you power to move, love to endure, and soundness of mind to remain clear-headed when tough times press against you. Faith accepts this gift and refuses to let fear do. Mine 8, decision-making. My friends, faith in the unknown often demands surrender. It is not about controlling every variable. It is about yielding your plans to God and saying, "I trust you more than I trust my own understanding." This surrender is not weakness but strength. It frees you from carrying burdens you were never meant to hold. Consistency also marks real faith. Ruth gleaned day after day in the fields. She did not stop after one attempt. She continued with quiet diligence, believing that her work mattered. This persistence positioned her for recognition and blessing. Faith is not always about dramatic gestures. Sometimes it is expressed in daily faithfulness, small acts that build into great testimony. Faith reshapes perspective. Naomi saw herself as empty when she returned to Bethlehem. Yet Ruth's presence beside her was evidence that God had not abandoned her. The same fields that seemed ordinary became the site of extraordinary favor. Faith changes how you see what is in front of you. It allows you to notice provision hidden in plain sight. Your faith during hardship will also speak to others. Ruth's loyalty inspired Naomi. Her courage became a for even greater blessing. A spirit of gratitude keeps despair from taking root. It reminds you that God has already done much,